We have a smorgasbord of topics to cover today on this Friday free-for-all edition of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Krabs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who make Locked On NFL Scouting your first listen every day, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets. Guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started.
Joe, we are kind of wrapping up our debrief of the 2024 NFL Draft today. We did a week worth of program. The dust has settled from round one. You have not yet reached the 1 week anniversary of Keon Coleman becoming a Buffalo Bill.
No, that comes.
Some people may listen to this, and we will have surpassed the 1 week anniversary. But as we sit down and record, very, very cruel of the Bills to make you wait an extra day.
You know,
you took that in stride, though. I would have been frustrated.
Really?
Maybe it's because my team didn't pick in the first round for the last 2 years. So if you told me we get up on the clock and then we're out and you're gonna make me wait till Friday, I'd have been annoyed.
I had championed trading out for like the last month, so it was very much what I wanted to get done. So I was pretty happy with trading out of the first round.
So do you have any trading out observations? Get us into it.
I know that's an awesome segue, but none of the three topics that I have brought to the table really have much to do with that. Yeah.
All right. Go ahead. Kick us off then.
All right. So don't be mad. Don't be mad at me, Kyle Krabs, but I have some topics that are not necessarily 2024 NFL draft related. So the
do you
first
have any
one
that are?
Yes, but you have to wait for that.
Okay.
This one is draft related, but not 2024 NFL draft related. The deadline to pick up 5th-year options has come and gone.
It has.
12 players had their 5th-year option declined. A lot of these are very obvious and expected, but maybe there's one or two that are interesting. Here's the list. Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Justin Fields, Mac Jones. Pause. That's not great. That's 4 quarterbacks, right? After we just saw 6 go in the first round of this past draft.
Won't be surprised if 3 years from now.
Right. It's just a sobering reality of you think you got a guy, man, but just wait. They don't all pan out. So those are your first 4. Then we get to Zaven Collins, Jamin Davis, Kadarius Toney, Caleb Farley, Najee Harris, Peyton Turner, Eric Stokes, and Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. Of course, Alex Weatherwood was cut from his contract. Rashad Bateman didn't have enough accrued seasons to be eligible. So 12 players ultimately had them declined. Is there anything from that list that really stands out to you outside of, 4 quarterbacks?
No. 60%, I can do that math. It's 18 out of 30 eligible players at their 5th-year options exercise. It feels like it's right in the sweet spot of where we kind of consistently see first-round guys go. There's some guys that maybe haven't answered all their questions, but from an economic standpoint, it still makes sense. But none of those 12 that did not have their 5th-year options activated necessarily surprised me. I was like, oh, really? They didn't want the fully guaranteed 5th year for that guy. I think most of them are pretty logical.
And not to create a can of worms here, but I think the name that surprises people is Najee Harris, who's opened his career with 3 1,000-yard seasons.
Stop viewing the game of football exclusively through the lens of fantasy football.
But here's the angle. This is the angle to go through with that. It's not. It's that I think Omar Khan, as the general manager of this team, is absolutely doing business differently. Right? We saw it the same way for so long under Kevin Colbert, and they had a lot of success. I'm not casting shade, but they are doing business differently. And I think that's my big prevailing thought as I consider what we've seen over the last 2 years from Pittsburgh. Trades, Kevin Colbert's picking this up all day long, right?
Probably.
I just feel like it's a new day in Pittsburgh, and it's been interesting to see that because you don't normally see teams drastically change how they operate, but I think you've seen it in Pittsburgh.
Especially a team like Pittsburgh who has been so stable, right? And it wasn't like they fired Kevin Colbert or they fired their coach. There was just a succession plan in place. And as that succession plan has come in, I would generally agree. I think Pittsburgh is a team that is doing things a little differently now than kind of the standard with Kevin Colbert that you came to expect. I think can I?
Yeah, you go, please.
Yeah, excuse me. I think the first thing that I want to take away from this draft, and that's kind of where my talking points all come from, is a lesson that I'll kind of be carrying with me as I'm forecasting drafts moving forward, especially if I find that it does year over year hold up. But we talked on the live stream about, as this draft unfolded, about the run on tackles and the lack of run on interior offensive linemen. And foiling that against the free agency spending for tackles and interior offensive linemen, I thought was a really fascinating subplot of kind of the value of the offensive lineman, where you had Graham Barton slipped all the way to 26 as somebody who's perceived to be an interior offensive lineman. He was the only interior offensive lineman to go in the first round. Hey, Christian Hayes made it to the third round, right? Jackson Powers Johnson, Zach Frazier slips to 52 to go to Pittsburgh. Speaking of the Steelers, Jackson Powers Johnson goes to the Raiders at, I think it was 44, if I remember correctly, the draft order off the top of my head. I'm pulling these numbers off the top of my head. You had guys that we thought were day two guys slide into, whether it was mahogany for whatever medical question that might exist there, or South Dakota State kid, McCormick. He fell. He went to Pittsburgh or San Francisco in the fourth round.
Pittsburgh, you're right. 119. Yep.
Pittsburgh at 119. Just a lot of players that I would have expected to go earlier didn't go. And you contrast that against tackles, where maybe Kingsley Suama'Atia didn't go as early as we thought he would because everybody mocked him to Kansas City at 32. But by and large, the tackles were done. And that's not a surprise because of positional value and rookie contracts. And I just got done doing all the salary cap update for the Dolphins rookie class in one of my own documents that I have. And like Patrick Paul's cap hit this year is like $1.2 million. Like, yeah, for an offensive tackle, and you got him in the second round, and you think he's going to be a long-term starter for you, potentially as a developmental guy. Like, it's hard to beat those dollars at offensive tackle, right? But just how free agency, there was no life in the tackle market, and everybody spent on interior guys. And then you get to the draft, and even though it was a good interior class, those guys still didn't go. I thought was something that I will try to be cognizant of in future free agent trends going into a draft.
So that'll be a fun lens to, I'm sure we'll have a podcast episode next year. How free agency dollars and positional spending could dictate the 2025 NFL draft. I like that a lot. And that's actually a really good segue into my next talking point, which does involve the 2025 NFL draft. So we'll get to that here in just a moment. So be sure to stick with us. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. By the way,
yeah. Have you seen Ray Garvin's new background?
No, but I know that he cares a lot about every detail, so I'm sure it's awesome.
Holy cow. I'm going to have to pick Ray's brand. I just got a couple different tabs up, and one of them's X, Twitter.
Yeah. And
the top thing on my following sheet was or timeline was a Ray video. If you're not following Ray, Ray GQQUE, and really like everything Ray does. He's outstanding. There's some fantasy focus there, but also just like evaluation stuff. Ray's really good. So sorry.
Well,
Get back on track.
Ray's good people. All the shout outs we can for Ray. He deserves them. So I teased that I wanted to talk a little bit about the 2025 NFL draft.
Mhm.
And I am hashtag never too early for a mock draft. And I enjoyed seeing the work put together by two draft analysts that made a 2025 mock draft, one of them being Jordan Reed, one of them being Dane Brugler. And what's really interesting to me about just kind of scanning through who those guys perceive as the top talent, and those guys are certainly dialed in. The positional distribution is really different than the draft that we just consumed, right? 14 offensive players in a row. This coming draft feels like it's very much defense heavy. Let me give you the positional breakdowns for both Jordan Reed and Dane Brugler. Quarterbacks, they both had 3. Running backs, 0.
Who are the
I don't have that in front of me. I think it was Georgia, Carson Beck, Shadeur Sanders, and Quin Ewers. I think that's who it was in all 3, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
No running backs, 1 tight end. Jordan had 5 wide receivers. Dane had 4. Jordan had 4 offensive linemen. Dane had 6. Jordan had 9 edge rushers. Dane had 8. They both had 4 defensive tackles. They both had 1 linebacker. They both had 4 corners. They both had 1 safety. But you are talking about 12 defensive linemen in one of them, 13 in the other. A little different look. Now, obviously, the season's going to play out, right? There's a lot of information that's going to come. But as somebody who loves defensive line play, I'm already excited about this coming class.
And I think you could tie that back to the 2024 draft too, where you said there were 3 quarterbacks, and they were Carson Beck, Shadeur Sanders, and Quin Ewers as
yes, if I'm not mistaken,
projected first-round players. If I was in the top 12, I'd have probably picked one of these guys too. A lot of questions with, I think, all 3 of those guys. I think Beck obviously playing at Georgia and kind of their infrastructure, you probably feel like that's maybe the cleanest out of that group. But Quin was very scattershot, very gifted arm, a very scattershot player. And then you have Shadeur as playing behind an offensive line that they played in I think there was a big conflict between the style of play that Colorado had, and this is a case in point, they changed their offensive coordinator and play caller. But the style of offense that they played versus Shadeur's play style, I think was kind of in contrast. And for somebody who likes to create big plays, I do wish he was maybe a little bit of a better athlete, like an athlete with the ball in his hands to move around and extend plays. I'd probably be drafting Bo Nix too. I honestly would. And I know I'm higher on the consensus than Bo Nix, or I was higher on the consensus than Bo Nix. But speaking of quarterbacks and selections, Minnesota took one. And this isn't necessary. This is more of like a ideological question for you, because I saw this came through my timeline. It was from Thor Nystrom, who give love to Thor too. He does outstanding work as well. But he was on a Vikings podcast, and he's a Vikings fan, and he's been championing JJ McCarthy. I believe he's a Vikings fan, but I know he's been championing JJ. He better be with the name Thor, right? If you're not a Vikings fan with Thor and your name's Thor, I don't know. But he's been a big-time champion in the pre-draft process of JJ McCarthy. But this isn't about JJ McCarthy. It's about the trade for Dallas Turner. And there was this whole discussion that they had about overpaying to go up and get Dallas Turner. And Thor, and the point that he made, or the argument that he made was, in reality, when you come on the clock and you know who's available, you're no longer trading for the 17th pick. You're trading for a player that you have ranked in a certain stratosphere in your own personal rankings. And that was kind of like the justification of Dallas Turner was much more highly graded than the 17th pick from a value perspective. So that's why you feel better about what they gave to move up and get Dallas Turner if you felt it was an overpay. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because I kind of see the argument. I kind of don't see the argument. And I'm just kind of curious, like, that I hadn't really thought of it that way. It's like, well, we're trading up to 17, but we're trading for a player that's hypothetically 7th on our board. Is there some middle ground between the value of 7 and 17 that makes us feel comfortable giving up more because we know who we're getting and what we think that player is?
Well, I think it is appropriate to look at it through that lens. You are trading for an actual player, not for a draft spot. So I think on the clock trades, they're a little bit different. I don't know that it makes me feel better about the trade when you look at it through that lens. They wind up giving up 42, 167, and 188, and a 2025 2, 3, and 4. So 2 2s, a 3, a 4, and 2 5s. That's a lot, man.
To go up 6 spots.
Right. And man, I like Dallas Turner, but not like that. You know what I mean? I look at other trades, and I'm not sure that it makes me feel better about it. When, like, Marcus Davenport, you thought that was worth 2 first-round picks and a 4. Now, Patrick Mahomes, was he worth two 1s and a 3? Yeah, heck of a trade, Kansas City, heck of a trade. So I like the idea of looking at it through that lens, but that probably furthers my personal belief that the only players really worth trading up for are quarterbacks when you don't have one. Like, I just have a hard time with this, especially because, like, at 23, if they don't pick Dallas Turner there, is there a chance that one of those top 4 edge rushers get there? I know Chop went, is it 21 or 22?
21.
I think they would have got one of them at 23, Kyle, if they didn't make the move to trade up for Turner.
Okay, so let's do the domino effect. Jacksonville stays at 17 and takes,
I think, Brian Thomas. I thought that was their guy all along. They just felt like they can move back.
Pick 18.
When they found out Buffalo wasn't wanting to move up for him, I think that's when they said, okay, we're moving back.
Cincinnati picked 18. They're still picking Amarius Mims.
Yes.
The Rams picked 19. They picked an edge.
Verse,
so
I think
whether it was Verse or Turner,
yeah.
they take an edge.
Yeah.
It's just whether they had Turner coveted higher than 20 was Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh went with Altanu.
Yep. Miami at 21.
I don't think so. Yeah, this is now edge 3 instead of edge 4.
Right.
And then you had Philly.
Quinyon Mitchell, that wasn't going to change.
So it's the difference of edge 4 as Chop Robinson, hypothetically, versus Dallas Turner, worth all of the picks that you outlined.
Not for me.
I guess the other layer to that, though, and this is what I really love about getting out of a draft is kind of testing all of your ideals and things you think. Think about the edge cliff this year.
Huge.
So you had 4 bona fide first-round guys. If you want to classify Darius, I know you classify Darius Robinson inside.
Yeah.
And I think in Arizona, I think there's a pretty good chance he probably plays around 285, 290 and is not a true outside guy. So if that's the case, put him off to the side.
When does the next one get drafted, Kyle?
Was Chris Braswell the next one?
I mean, I'm literally trying to.
It was it Nealand and Braswell at 55 and 56, or 56 and 57?
Yeah, I think your next one went 56, Nealand, and then Braswell 57,
and then Braylon Trice went 74.
Yep, and Joan Ellis 76. Yep. So you had a massive.
It is guaranteeing yourself getting into that group of 4 worth some of the difference?
If you have,
we could sit here and we could look at how the draft unfolded and say, oh, well, they could have got one at 23, but you don't know that in real time.
If you have a top 10 grade on Dallas Turner, okay. But at what point do you start asking yourself some questions? Well, crap, we got a top 10 grade on this guy, and he's available at 17, and he's a pass rusher. And another team picked a pass rusher over him. Like, I believe in scouting with convictions, but like at some point you got to be like, man, like what don't we know here? Because if this is that type of talent, there's no way he should be there. Mm-hmm. And teams get it wrong all the time. Fascinating conversation. One more segment coming up. I got a unique talking point coming up on the other side. I'm sure Kyle has something amazing. Stick with us, folks. We'll be right back. All right, game off. We got to pause here. You know why we got to pause? I bet you'll never guess. We got to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You've already talked about that, but there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. And the more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much you can get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. There's always something fun and new to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on.
Let me have it.
I love the NFL draft. I love it. I also love all of the team YouTube content that comes out.
Y'all got
afterward.
some good stuff coming. I've seen the previews for the Keon Coleman Combine interview.
Yeah, dude's a character for sure. And while that was on my short list to bring up, there has been some really, really cool, like I can't get enough of it, whether it's like in the war room stuff or the calls to the players or like the going back to the combine meetings. Dude, I just want to spend my whole life watching it. It's so good. It's so good. It's rare. It's stuff like, I don't know, like we love the NFL draft. That's the reason we're here. And it's the things that you've always fantasized about getting a chance to see, and you get a chance to see it now. And so I wanted to shout out some of my favorites that I've seen. How about the Colts and Chris Ballard and that whole situation where they're trying to move up and I had it in my mock draft, right? I had him going up for Marvin Harrison. I believe they really wanted to do it. I wasn't crazy. They couldn't find a partner. And then they wind up sticking and picking Leatu Latu, and just to kind of see the evolution of that conversation in that room and how they were like really satisfied no matter what. And like the thing about Chris Ballard, I question a lot of his decision-making. I love how he operates though. Like just his personality, how he collaborates with his staff. It's always been so cool to watch. So I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the Eagles in their quest to trade up for Cooper DeJean. Like they were frantic. Howie was doing everything he could to go get Cooper DeJean, and I get it. It's top 11 player on my board. To see all that come together, and like celebrating when other teams don't pick the guy you want. Like you could feel that. I could imagine if you and I were in a draft room, it would be a lot like that.
Did you see Joe Douglas celebrate when they took A.D. Mitchell?
Yes.
He was like, "Oh, they took Mitchell." Yes.
It's so good. And then for Joe Douglas, that whole like him and Robert Saleh like celebrating free money. Like, oh yeah, we'll move back one spot and get the same player. But like we say those things out loud, and then it's like, yeah, of course they mean it too. And then of course the Jets and their efforts to go up for Malachi Corley was pretty intense as well. They started calling everywhere, like as a pick 45. They start trying to get a hold of him. Yeah. And then you pick up little nuggets along the way where like, oh, they say, well, Buffalo was trying to trade up. And then that lines up with, Bean saying he did want to trade up for Cole Bishop. He was able to get it. So it's kind of cool to see like just the little nuggets that you get along the way to kind of piece together the whole picture. So please, the NFL teams, get it out for us, man. We want it. We need it. We crave it.
The other content in that lens that I would shout out. Did you happen to catch the Chargers call with Brendan Rice? No,
I didn't see this one. Yeah, I know it was a really tough day for him.
Yeah, he got on a plane, flew out for his best friend's funeral. He was a pallbearer. He took the phone call. I think he was at the airport when he took the phone call. He got drafted 225 to the Chargers.
Yeah.
And you could hear the emotion in his voice, but he was like, "I love Coach Harbaugh." That was like the first words out of his mouth when they called him. But Joe Horitz called him, and they were, kind of just catching up, and then so hopefully we can make your day a little better as best we can. And then in that moment when that switch flipped for Rice, that was a very emotional one. So that one was very cool.
I need to see that one and the Fiske one. I heard the Fiske one's really good.
I have not caught that one either. And content that I have not caught, but I know I had seen on the timeline that had come out that I will blindly pub because I know how good of work this person does. Jordan Rodriguez.
Oh, yeah. I can't wait to read it. Yeah. Yeah.
He like shadowed the Rams scouting department for like the full circuit.
Yeah.
And did like the behind the scenes. And Jordan's one of the best
Star. She's a
long
star,
form
man.
sports
Yes.
writers like in the game right now. She was, obviously had her hand in the Playmakers podcast series with McVay and all them.
Elite. God, I hope she has something for us this summer, man. Please.
Yep. Let's see what she's got cooked. But this is the next one on that I'm really excited to kind of see. I guess the last one that I would have for you is if you felt like there was a position that you felt ended up viewing very similarly to how the draft actually fell. Because I have one position group in particular that really stands out to me that I was like, this year, more so than many other years, I felt like I really had the valuations in line with how the league took these players.
I think I have an answer for you. Obviously, right now is like I didn't have time to prepare, which I'm not criticizing you. It just to me, it feels like off the sniff test, interior defensive line. Maybe not exactly the order, but like I had been very high on this interior defensive line class, particularly in the second round. And we saw that like a legit run on those players. And I felt like my valuations were pretty close to the league minus Mason Smith, who I figured the NFL always buys in on tools.
And when it was bulky, all bets are off, right?
Right. But even who was that? Like Christian Boyd went 199 and he was kind of hyped up. And I'm like, man, I don't see it with this guy. I felt like I thought me and the league saw the interior defensive line class pretty similarly. I'm very curious. So you've thought this through. I'm curious where you went with this.
Yeah, I was surprised to see how the numbers came out on this one. There were 16 wide receivers drafted in the top 100 in the first 3 rounds. I had 16 wide receivers with round 1, 2, and 3 grades, and 15 of the 16 went in the 16 that were actually drafted in the top 100.
And Malik Washington's the brand guy that fell, and then he went to the Dolphins. Talk about the dub of dubs.
Right. So that was Luke McCaffrey. I had a 5 on. He went 100. That was the one that went earlier. And look, the order of it, I kind of talked about for a lot of the Dolphins stuff because there was some like, who's going to be wide receiver 3? Would they draft one in the first 2 days? That order was very bunched. I felt the tiers were very broken where you had a top 3 and they went 1 through 3 in the wide receiver rankings. And then I thought the next 7, like 4 through 10, I thought were very closely bunched together. And it was just what order are they going to come off of? Like it's a ice cream flavor type thing, right?
Based on what the teams wanted as well.
Based on what the teams want. And there was only one of the next 7 guys that went. I want to make sure I get it right. There was only one that wasn't in that tier of guys. And it was, I did have Keon Coleman in the 3rd tier of wide receivers. And the one that fell out was Roman Wilson. And I think if you look at the physical traits and attributes of those players, you can understand why the team would maybe covet Coleman's skill set for what he can be, and the time, play, speed, and the size and the physicality versus Roman Wilson. Maybe he can play outside. It'll be interesting to see how he builds out his game and complements what Pittsburgh has.
Yeah.
But he's tough as nails, right? But he's not big, and that kind of creates that conflict. The other one in wide receiver specifically that I had, my question for you is, why do you think Malik Washington fell to the 6th round?
I don't know. That's a great question, and especially because of how much the league valued Corley, and I like Washington better. That's tough to reconcile, especially when you're looking for explosive plays that aren't necessarily throwing the ball down the field. To get a guy with the yak ability in the hands of Malik Washington is something that should have happened a whole lot sooner than pick 184.
Yeah. So I cross-reference. Cowing went 135. Anthony Gould from Oregon State went 142. Those are similarly statured players to Malik Washington at 5'8.5", 195. Gould, I think, was 175. So, but they both ran in the high 4.3s. And Malik Washington ran 4.47.
Oh,
So it's not a bad time, but I'm sitting here, I'm wondering, like, if you're that undersized, is a 1/10 of a second really the difference of 2 rounds in the draft?
not based on the skill I watch on tape.
I would be inclined to agree with you, but that as I was trying to reconcile this player that everybody loved, who had a good pre-draft showing, who went to the Shrine Bowl and tore the heck out of it, had good tape. He was a productive player at Northwestern and then goes to Virginia. I just thought that one was interesting as I'm looking at these other slot types and I'm like, what is the difference? Or these undersized, shorter players, what is the difference? And it was the timed speed of the players, with both Cowing and Gould going in the 4th round.
I mean, that's a silly tiebreaker for 40 spots when I feel like the one guy has a lot more than the rest. Yeah, but
I was just trying to wrap my head around it, you know, because so much, like I said, 15 out of 16 guys that I had rounds 1 through 3 grades on were in that group. Only one fell out. It was Malik Washington. I'm like, why? So I thought that, not mad about it.
No,
but I did think it was very interesting that it happened.
Bet not.
That is going to do it for us here this week on Locked On NFL Scouting. I'm Kyle Krabs. He's Joe Marino. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. We appreciate you guys for checking out the show. As always, we hope you have a great weekend and come on back for us tomorrow, or not tomorrow, on Monday, as we get ready to shift gears into the next stage of our off-season content here on Locked On NFL Scouting.